I'm going to start with a story that probably sounds familiar. You saw a cheap, 5-gallon dust collector on a forum, thought, I can get that for a few $100 and it'll do the job. Bought it. And then a week later you're choking on fine sawdust because the bag never sealed, the motor stalls, and you're left with a shop that's messier than before you bought anything at all. That regret is what makes me pause before recommending any budget collector, especially when you're trying to keep a small wood shop or a hobby-level metal shop clean enough to breathe. So the question I'm really trying to answer today is, does the Oneida Air Systems Supercell 14-gallon high-pressure portable dust collector feel like a smarter, less regrettable purchase, or is it just another pricey gadget that looks good on paper? Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. I spent a few evenings digging through spec sheets, watching a handful of YouTubers set these machines up in cramped garages, and scrolling through the comment sections of a few dedicated woodworking forums. What stood out was that most people who complained about low-budget units were hitting the same roadblocks: insufficient suction, filters that clogged within the first hour, and a lack of flexibility when you need to move the collector around. The Supercell promises 10 higher suction than a standard collector, a 5 HP fan blower, and a HEPA-grade filter that's supposed to stay clean longer thanks to a pulse cleaner. Those claims aren't just marketing fluff. They line up with the kind of performance you actually need when you're pulling fine particles from a table saw or a router that runs for hours. Let's talk about who this thing is really for. If you run a small shop where you have a bandsaw, a router table, and maybe a small CNC, you'll find yourself constantly swapping dust ports, and you'll quickly learn that a 14-gallon bin can keep you from emptying the dust container every 15 minutes. The Supercell's rolling steel stand makes it easy to wheel it into the corner of a 1012 shop and then pull it out when you need to clear a larger job. The wireless remote is a surprisingly handy feature. You can stay at the workbench and turn the collector on or off without having to climb up to the top of the stand. For anyone who does a lot of finish-level sanding, the HEPA filter is a real benefit because it captures the ultrafine particles that a standard bag filter would let through, keeping the air in your shop healthier and reducing the amount of time you spend wiping down surfaces after a sanding session. On the other side of the coin, if you're a weekend hobbyist who only runs a table saw once a month and you're comfortable emptying a small bag collector after each use, the Supercell probably feels like overkill. Its 5 HP motor draws a noticeable amount of power, and while that gives you the advertised suction boost, it also means your circuit could be flirting with its limit if you already have a couple of other heavy tools running. In a typical 120V residential setup, you might see the unit pull close to 12 amps, so you'll want to make sure your shop's wiring can handle that without tripping breakers. If you're renting a space that only offers a single 20-amp circuit, you might end up having to shut down other equipment just to run the dust collector, which defeats the purpose of a portable solution. Now, let's get into the practical strengths that actually matter when you're in the middle of a project. The biggest win for me is the pulse cleaner system. Instead of pulling the filter out, tapping it, and waiting for it to dry, you simply press a button on the remote and a short burst of compressed air blows the dust cake off the filter surface. I tried it while sanding a piece of pine that produced a lot of fine dust. After a 10-minute run, the suction was still strong, and the filter didn't feel clogged. That translates into less downtime and fewer trips to the trash can, which is a real productivity boost. Another strength is the universal collection capability. The 5 HP fan blower can handle both flow, low-pressure scenarios like a large table saw dust port and higher-pressure setups like a downdraft sanding table. I ran a 4-inch hose from the collector to a portable downdraft table, and the airflow was still solid enough to pull the dust straight into the bin without any noticeable back pressure. The weaknesses, however, are subtle but worth noting. First, the bin is 14 gallons, which sounds generous, but the bin's shape is more rectangular than cylindrical, meaning the bottom corners fill up faster. When you get to about 3/4 full, you start to feel a slight drop in suction because the fan has to work harder to pull the same volume of air through a denser dust load. It's not a catastrophic loss, but it does mean you need to keep an eye on the fill level if you're running long-duration jobs. Second, the stand, while sturdy, is a bit tall.